What if the one idea you believed in, the one that could change everything, was laughed at, ridiculed, and crushed before it had a chance to grow? The rain hammered against the New York pavement, drowning out the sounds of the city's relentless rush. It was a kind of cold, merciless night that mirrored the storm inside Darren Cole's mind. He stood beneath the dim glow of a flickering street lamp, gripping a wrinkled manila folder, the last remnant of a dream he refused to let die. Just hours ago, he had sat across from Thomas Whitmore, a powerful venture capitalist known for funding tech startups. Darren had walked into that meeting with hope, a fire in his chest, an invention that could revolutionize online retail. But he had walked out with nothing but humiliation. "You really think this would work?" Whitmore had scoffed, flipping lazily through Darren's proposal. "An app designed by you?" His eyes had flickered with thinly veiled condescension. "Listen, kid, people like me invest in innovations created by real entrepreneurs, not some broke dreamer with a laptop from the Stone Age." The words had cut deep, but it was the laughter, the sneering, cruel chuckle that followed, that seared itself into Darren's memory like a scar. He had left the pristine high-rise, head low, but his fists clenched. Darren wasn't just broke. He was drowning. His bank account was down to its last $20. Rent was overdue. Eviction notices piled up on his worn-out coffee table, and his part-time barista job barely covered food. But worse than the financial struggles was the shame, the feeling that no matter how hard he tried, the world would never take him seriously. Whitmore hadn't just rejected his idea. He had laughed at it, and Darren knew exactly why. He had seen the way Whitmore's gaze lingered on his worn-out suit, the way his lips curled when he spoke. Like he didn't expect someone like Darren, a young black entrepreneur with no Ivy League degree or trust fund, to sit at his table. But that was the thing about underestimating the desperate. It made them dangerous. Darren walked the dark streets, the city's neon lights reflecting in the puddles at his feet. He didn't have the luxury of giving up. If Whitmore wouldn't fund him, he'd find another way. He spent a night in his cramped studio apartment, reworking his pitch deck, tweaking every detail of his app's interface. The concept was simple: an AI-powered e-commerce assistant that could predict and personalize online shopping in ways no platform had before. But no one would care unless he could prove it worked. With no investors, no funding, and no one willing to take him seriously, Darren made a decision. If no one would believe in him, he'd believe in himself. The next morning, he walked into the nearest pawn shop and sold the only valuable thing he had left: his late mother's gold necklace. The owner gave him $1,200, just enough to scrape by and get the minimum viable product of his app running. With sleepless nights, an old laptop held together by duct tape, and sheer determination, Darren coded every single line himself. For weeks, he lived on instant noodles and black coffee. For months, he battled rejection after rejection. Companies refusing to partner with him, investors laughing in his face. He was ghosted, ignored, belittled, until one night, everything changed. Darren had finally done it. His prototype was functional. More than that, it was brilliant. He had found a small-time investor, someone who believed in him enough to put in just enough cash to launch a beta version. Excited and hopeful, he had turned to his closest friend, Jared, a software engineer who had been by his side since college. "I need a co-founder," Darren had said, his voice filled with energy for the first time in months. "This is it, man. We can make history." Jared had grinned, clinking his beer against Darren's. "Hell yeah, man. I'm with you all the way." For the first time in a long time, Darren had felt something dangerous: hope. But 3 weeks later, Jared disappeared. Calls went unanswered. Texts were ignored. And then Darren saw it. Jared had stolen his code. Under a rebranded name, Jared had pitched Darren's app to a rival investor, one who immediately funded it for 6 figures. Darren stared at his screen, heart pounding. The betrayal was so deep it felt like someone had ripped his ribs apart and stomped on his heart. He had trusted Jared like a brother. And now, Jared stood on stages, shaking hands with billionaires, taking credit for something Darren had built from blood, sweat, and starvation. The humiliation was unbearable. The next weeks were a blur. Darren stopped leaving his apartment, stopped checking emails. Depression sank in like an anchor. Maybe Whitmore had been right. Maybe he wasn't meant for this world of high-stakes tech. Maybe it was time to quit, to get a normal job, to let the dream die. But then something happened that pulled him from the depths of despair. A message, an email from an old college professor who had heard about Jared's success story. Darren, I know that was your work. If you're still fighting, I have someone you need to meet. Attached was a name, a powerful name, Liam McGregor, a billionaire tech mogul, someone with a reputation for spotting real talent. Darren's hands trembled as he stared at the screen. This was it, his last chance, his final shot at proving everyone wrong, and he would take it. Darren's heart pounded as he read the email again. Liam McGregor, a billionaire, a kingmaker in the tech industry, a man who could take Darren's dream and turn it into something untouchable. But he had to act fast. Darren borrowed train fare from his neighbor and took the subway to Midtown Manhattan, where McGregor's headquarters towered over the city like a monument to untouchable wealth. His shoes were worn out, his dress shirt had been ironed with a pot of boiling water, and his nerves were fried. But he stepped through those glass doors with nothing but determination. McGregor's assistant barely glanced at him before scoffing. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Darren admitted, gripping his manila folder tight. "But then Mr. McGregor is unavailable." Panic flared in Darren's chest. He had come too far to be turned away like this. Desperation overrode politeness. "Tell him I'm the guy whose app was stolen by Jared Coleman." The assistant's fingers froze over the keyboard. She looked up. 5 minutes later, Darren was in McGregor's office. The billionaire sat behind a sleek, minimalist desk, watching him with piercing blue eyes. Silver-haired, powerful, and intimidating, Liam McGregor was the type of man who could end careers with a single email. "So," McGregor said, tapping his fingers together, "tell me everything." Darren told him everything. How he had built the AI-powered e-commerce assistant from scratch, how Jared had stolen it, how investors like Whitmore had laughed in his face. McGregor listened in silence. When Darren finished, the billionaire exhaled sharply. "Jared a fraud," McGregor said, leaning back. "And I don't invest in frauds." Darren's pulse spiked. "Does that mean?" McGregor's lips curled. "It means I'm interested. I'll have my legal team review your case. If your story checks out, I'll fund your startup. But be warned, kid, this industry is a war zone. You need to be ready to fight." Darren's hands clenched into fists. "I've been fighting my whole life." McGregor smiled. "Good." For the first time in months, hope burned in Darren's chest. A week later, Darren's phone rang. "We're moving forward with legal action," McGregor's lawyer, Veronica Mills, announced. "Jared stole your intellectual property. We can prove it." Darren had never dealt with lawyers before. He had never set foot in a courtroom. But now, he found himself at the center of a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. Jared fought back hard. His lawyers flooded Darren with counterclaims, accusing him of stealing their code. Corporate sharks circled, whispering to media that Darren was just some bitter ex-friend looking for a handout. Darren had to sit through deposition after deposition, grilled about his background, his finances, his education. Every single mistake he had ever made in his life dragged into the open like dirty laundry. And then the real attack came. 2 months into the lawsuit, Darren received a letter. His landlord was evicting him. A clerical error had suddenly voided his lease. His rent, paid by the last of McGregor's emergency fund, was mysteriously lost. The same week, his bank account was locked due to a fraud investigation. He went to apply for a personal loan. Denied. His credit score, which had been shaky but decent, had inexplicably plummeted. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was happening. Jared had powerful friends. Darren was being erased. With no home, no access to his own money, and nowhere to go, Darren found himself sleeping in shelters. He worked odd jobs on the table, sweeping restaurant floors at night just to afford meals. His phone, his only lifeline to lawsuit, died one evening, and he had to beg a gas station worker to let him charge it behind the counter. Meanwhile, Jared's company skyrocketed in value. Darren watched from a public library computer as news outlets praised Jared as the next tech genius. The Forbes cover calling him a new visionary in AI. Rage and hopelessness battled inside Darren. Was this it? Was this where his story ended? No, because despite everything, despite the sleepless nights, the betrayals, the system rigging itself against him, Darren still had one thing left: his mind. One night, sleeping in an abandoned subway station, Darren had an idea. A bold, reckless, dangerous idea. If the world refused to see him, he'd force them to look. He dug through his emails and found an old message from a tech journalist. Then he typed out a message that would set the internet on fire. Jared Coleman stole my company, ruined my life, and now he's profiting from my stolen work. I have proof. Who wants the exclusive? Then he hit send and waited. Darren had never gone viral before, but the morning after he sent that email, his phone, patched together with a cracked screen and barely enough battery to last a few hours, blew up with notifications. Journalists wanted interviews. Bloggers demanded proof. Twitter, X as it was now called, was ablaze with people dragging Jared Coleman, questioning whether the so-called AI genius was really just a fraud. And then one message changed everything. Subject, urgent. We need to talk. It was from someone Darren hadn't heard from in years. Marcus Ellison. Back in college, Marcus had been a software geek, a quiet genius who had disappeared into the depths of Silicon Valley. They weren't close, but they had worked on a project together once, one that had never seen the light of day. Darren opened the email. I read your story. I know what happened, and I think I have something that can help you turn the tables. Darren met Marcus at a dingy cafe in Brooklyn, sitting in a back booth far from curious eyes. Marcus slid his laptop across the table. Tell me if this looks familiar. Darren squinted at the screen. It was a set of old files, ones he hadn't seen in years. And then it hit him. The original code, not the AI-powered e-commerce app that Jared had stolen. Something older. Something he and Marcus had built in college before it was abandoned. It had started as a personal side project, an AI algorithm that could track source code changes in real time. It was meant to be used for debugging, allowing programmers to see exactly when, where, and how code had been altered. Darren's eyes widened. You still have this? Marcus grinned. Not just that. I've been running it for years, tweaking it, improving it. Darren's heart pounded. He could already see where this was going. This program, Marcus continued, can track every change made to Jared's code. If he stole your work, this will prove it, down to the exact line of code he copied when he copied it, and where it originally came from. Darren leaned back in his seat, exhaling sharply. This was it. The loophole. In the courtroom, proving someone stole an idea was nearly impossible. Ideas weren't protected by copyright. Only exact expressions of them were. But if Darren could prove that Jared had copied his actual lines of code, his lawsuit would go from a long shot to a slam dunk. Can it generate a full report? Darren asked. Marcus smirked. Already did. He clicked a file and a document appeared, pages upon pages of evidence. Exact timestamps, identical code strings, the unmistakable digital fingerprint of theft. And then Marcus clicked one more thing. A video. The video file was grainy, recorded from an old screen capture software Marcus had forgotten was running, but it was clear as day. Jared, sitting in his dorm room, years ago, copying Darren's work line by line. Then another video. Jared, years later, editing Darren's AI-powered e-commerce code, changing only a few words. Marcus grinned. I always said, man, people don't delete their past as well as they think they do. Darren's fingers shook as he scrolled through the evidence. This was beyond a legal win. This was a kill shot. Jared had built a multi-million-dollar empire on Darren's stolen work. And now, the whole world was about to know. Darren didn't waste time, with McGregor backing him. They called a press conference. Hundreds of reporters packed into the venue, cameras flashing as Darren stepped onto the stage. Behind him, a massive screen flickered to life. The moment Darren dropped the video evidence, the room exploded with noise. Journalists gasped. Reporters scrambled to tweet live updates. And within minutes, #Jared Coleman Exposed was trending worldwide. Jared tried to fight back. His lawyers rushed to file defamation lawsuits. His PR team scrambled to spin the narrative, but it was too late. Investors pulled out. Tech partners severed ties. His company's stock price crashed overnight. And then the SEC got involved. Because of Jared had stolen Darren's work, there was a chance he had falsified other records. Too, the same people who had once laughed at Darren were now scrambling to distance themselves from Jared. But just when Darren thought he had won, something happened that changed everything. The night after the press conference, Darren's phone rang. It was McGregor. "Kid," McGregor said, his voice unreadable. "We need to meet. Now." Darren arrived at McGregor's penthouse an hour later. The billionaire sat at his desk, hands clasped together. "You did well today," McGregor said slowly, "but there's something you need to see." He slid a contract across the desk. Darren frowned, picking it up. As he skimmed through the lines, his blood ran cold. McGregor wasn't helping him out of generosity. McGregor was taking everything. Buried deep in the fine print was a transfer of ownership clause. If Darren signed it, McGregor would own the rights to his technology. All of it, every single line of code Darren had bled for. McGregor's voice was calm but firm. "You're talented, Darren, but business is business. Without my legal team, you wouldn't have gotten this far. So let's be honest, you can't win this without me." Darren's hands clenched into fists. He had just escaped one thief, only to walk into the jaws of another. McGregor smiled. "Think about it carefully." Darren stared at the contract, his dream, his life's work, and now it was slipping away again. The cold reality of the contract weighed heavily on Darren as he stared at McGregor, who leaned back in his chair with a steely gaze. The billionaire had made his offer clear. McGregor wasn't giving Darren a handout. He was taking control. The rights to everything Darren had worked for were on the line, and McGregor's cold calculation made it clear. This was a power play. "Without me, you're nothing," McGregor said, his voice smooth but commanding. "I build an empire. I'll make you rich. All you need to do is sign the damn paper." Darren's mind raced. He had fought so hard to get here. It had taken everything, from a stolen idea, the hours of sleepless nights, to the public humiliation. Now he was on the verge of success, but at the cost of everything he had created. Would he allow McGregor to walk away with the lion's share of his work, or would he fight back? His hand hovered over the pen, but the words didn't match his resolve. He knew there had to be a way out of this. There was always another play. The question was, how could he take control of the situation without losing his soul? "You've got another option, Darren," McGregor continued, sensing his hesitation. "Think about it. You can be a millionaire, no, a billionaire. You just need to trust me. Sign the deal and I'll make sure you're set for life." Darren shook his head, his mind sharp despite the pressure. The past few days have been a whirlwind of discovery, of how far McGregor's reach extended and how cunning he could be. But now Darren saw the truth. McGregor didn't need him. He was a mere pawn in McGregor's chess game. Darren was nothing but a tool. Suddenly, the door opened with a sharp click. It was Marcus. He'd heard everything from outside the office and entered with determined stride, his face set in grim determination. "Darren, don't sign that." McGregor's eyes narrowed. "And who are you to interfere?" "Someone who's watched people like you manipulate the system for too long," Marcus replied. "We're not playing your game anymore. Darren has better things to do than sell himself to you." Darren stood up, the weight of McGregor's presence still heavy but no longer suffocating. He placed the pen down on the desk, locking eyes with McGregor. "I'm not signing." The silence in the room was suffocating. McGregor's expression soured, and for a moment, Darren thought he might lash out. But the billionaire merely chuckled, leaning forward, fingers laced in front of him. "You will regret this," McGregor warned. "The world is built on power, and I have it." "Not for long," Darren shot back. "I've learned something. You can keep your empire, McGregor. I'm taking mine back." That night, Darren sat alone in his apartment, the harsh glow of a single lamp illuminating his face. He hadn't signed the contract, and for the first time in a long time, the weight on his shoulders had lifted. The fight wasn't over, but Darren could see the first crack in McGregor's armor. Marcus had been right. The system that kept people like McGregor at the top was built on fear and control. But now, Darren knew the game. He wasn't the underdog anymore. He was the one who'd been playing the game all along, and it was time to take back control. Darren's phone buzzed with a new message. It was from one of his old contacts, a former business associate who had once worked with Jared Coleman. The message read, "I've been following your story. I think it's time you knew something about McGregor." The message included a link to a series of encrypted documents, but Darren knew better than to open them without caution. He connected his phone to his laptop, using a security program to decrypt the files. What he found sent a chill down his spine. McGregor had a history, one that Darren had never known about. A history of shady deals. A history of using others' work for his own gain. McGregor had built his fortune on exploitation, taking others' ideas and hiding the truth behind a well-curated image of success. Darren leaned back in his chair, the documents scattered in front of him like pieces of a puzzle. If he could expose McGregor's past, he could finally take the power back. But McGregor wasn't just a businessman. He was a master of deception. Taking him down wouldn't be easy. Darren knew he needed more than just knowledge. He needed leverage. Darren's first move was to reach out to journalists who had covered his initial story. He needed a bigger platform, something McGregor couldn't control. He set up a meeting with a prominent investigative reporter, Ava Brooks, who had made a name for herself exposing corporate corruption. They met in a nondescript coffee shop, far from the glare of the press. Ava had the look of someone who had seen it all. Sharp eyes, a no-nonsense attitude, and a notebook filled with scribbled stories. "You got McGregor on the ropes," Ava said, her tone direct. "But if you want to win this, you'll need more than just your story. You need proof. You need dirt." Darren nodded, pulling out the encrypted files from his laptop. "I've got something, but I need to go public with it." Ava scanned the documents, her eyes widening as she flipped through each page. "This is gold," she said. "We can expose his entire operation." But Darren wasn't just interested in exposing McGregor. He was thinking bigger now. "I want to bring the whole system down," Darren said, his voice steady. "McGregor is just one piece. The whole industry is built on theft, on taking from people like me, people who never get a chance." Ava's eyes narrowed, impressed by Darren's resolve. "You're playing a dangerous game." "I know, but I'm not going to let people like McGregor keep winning. I've learned too much to stay silent now." The next few months were a whirlwind. Darren and Ava worked together to track down every shady deal McGregor had been involved in. They reached out to whistleblowers, dug through old court records, and uncovered stories that McGregor had buried deep. But the deeper they went, the more dangerous it became. It was late one night when Darren received an unexpected message, this time from an anonymous email address. "I know what you're doing, and I want to help. Meet me at midnight in front of the old warehouse by the docks. You want to hear what I have to say." Darren didn't hesitate. He grabbed his jacket and left the apartment, heading to the location. The warehouse was dark, with only the occasional flicker of a street lamp illuminating the old brick walls. He waited in silence, the air heavy with tension. Finally, a shadow emerged in the darkness, a tall figure in a dark coat. "I've been watching you," the figure said, his voice low and gravelly. "You've been making waves, and you got McGregor nervous." Darren's heart raced. "Who are you?" The figure stepped closer, revealing his face. It was Liam McGregor. "You've been playing my game," McGregor said, his voice tinged with both admiration and warning. "But there's a bigger game, Darren, one you haven't even begun to understand." Darren's mind reeled. "What are you talking about?" McGregor smiled, his eyes cold. "I'm offering you a seat at the table. You want to take down the system? I'll give you the means. But be careful, you might not like what you uncover." Darren took a step back, unsure of what to say. The twists and turns were coming too fast now. Was McGregor playing him? Or was this something bigger than even he could understand? The next few weeks were filled with tension. Darren knew that exposing McGregor and the web of corruption he had woven into the system would take more than just a few whispered words or leaked documents. This would have to be precise, calculated, and hit hard. He needed to wait for the perfect moment. The moment when McGregor would be vulnerable. He'd already reached out to Ava Brooks, the journalist who had been following the story closely, and the two of them made plans to release their findings in the most public way possible, a primetime expose. Darren could feel the weight of the decision pressing against him, but he had no choice. McGregor had underestimated him, and now the time for reckoning had arrived. Ava was sharp, and her investigation had turned up far more than anyone had anticipated. McGregor wasn't just guilty of exploiting others' ideas. He was tied to shady dealings that could bring down entire sectors of the economy. It wasn't just a corporate scandal, it was a political one. There were powerful people at the highest levels of government, finance, and law involved, and McGregor was their puppet. The stage was set. Darren and Ava meticulously pieced together the puzzle. Ava had secured a major media outlet willing to broadcast the entire investigation. The evening before the release, Darren sat in front of his computer, staring at the final draft of the expose. The list of names, the incriminating evidence. It was all there, but it wasn't enough just to show the world the truth. He had to show them that McGregor wasn't untouchable. He needed to make sure McGregor's allies and the public would feel the heat. As the clock struck midnight, Darren clicked send. It didn't take long for the fallout to hit. The expose aired during prime time, and within hours, McGregor's empire began to crumble. The scandal erupted in every corner of the media, shaking the business world to its core. He tried to deny the accusations, but the evidence was overwhelming. However, McGregor was far from done. He had powerful friends, and they didn't take kindly to being exposed. The next day, Darren's phone rang incessantly, filled with threats and veiled warnings. McGregor wasn't going to go down quietly. Ava was the first to call. Darren, he's retaliating. He's already pulling strings behind the scenes, backdoor deals, lawsuits. He's trying to destroy everything you've built. But Darren had expected this. He was one step ahead. A part of the plan involved not just exposing McGregor, but also arming himself with the same tactics McGregor used. He had been digging into McGregor's financials, finding backdoor deals and corrupt practices that hadn't yet been uncovered. But there was more. He knew where McGregor's weaknesses were now. The tables were turning. Just as Darren thought things were going his way, a familiar voice called him. It was Liam McGregor, the man who had offered him a seat at the table. Darren wasn't sure whether Liam had genuine intentions or if he was playing his own game, but one thing was clear. Liam wanted Darren on his side. Darren, Liam said over the phone, his voice calm, almost too calm. You've done well, but if you think exposing McGregor's empire is going to change anything, you're wrong. You're just a small piece in a much bigger game. Darren clenched his jaw, refusing to back down. I'm not going to let you or anyone else manipulate me. I've seen what you're all about, Liam, and I'm done with your games. Liam chuckled softly. Oh, I think you'll come around. You'll see the bigger picture soon enough. The question is, are you willing to make the real sacrifices? The ones that will give you true power? Darren hung up. He was done being played. The enemy was no longer just McGregor. It was the entire system, the forces that had kept people like him down for so long. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about dismantling the system entirely. As McGregor retaliated, Darren's legal battles grew more intense. McGregor filed lawsuits against him, claiming that Darren had breached contracts, stolen intellectual property, and attempted to ruin his reputation. But Darren was ready. The evidence he had against McGregor was indisputable. His legal team had dug deep into McGregor's finances, uncovering proof that McGregor had made deals with corrupt politicians and rigged auctions to siphon funds from unsuspecting businesses. Darren's lawyer, Evelyn Shaw, had been instrumental in turning the tide. She was no stranger to high-profile cases and had a reputation for never backing down. They can throw as many lawsuits at you as they want, she said, her voice sharp as steel. We have them cornered. The courtrooms became a battleground. On one side was McGregor's polished, expensive legal team, an army of sharks looking to intimidate. On the other side was Darren, armed with the truth. It was a David versus Goliath scenario, but Darren had something McGregor didn't: the support of people who were tired of seeing the powerful get away with corruption. As the battle escalated, Darren realized that not everyone he trusted along the way had his best interests at heart. His old friend Marcus had been the one who first encouraged Darren to go public with his story. But now, Darren wasn't so sure. Marcus had been acting strange lately, more distant, more secretive. Darren needed answers. One night, after another grueling day in court, Darren confronted Marcus at his apartment. "What's going on, Marcus? You've been acting weird. Are you working with McGregor?" Marcus looked at Darren with a guilty expression, his face hardened by the strain. "I didn't want you to get hurt. I thought if you just let McGregor win, it would be easier on everyone. But I see now. I see what you're trying to do. You've been feeding McGregor information, haven't you?" Darren's voice cracked with betrayal. Marcus sighed. "I didn't want to go this far, but they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I didn't want to see you destroyed. I thought I was protecting you." Darren shook his head in disbelief. "You were protecting yourself. You sold me out for your own safety." As the weeks passed, Darren kept pushing forward. He wasn't just trying to win in court anymore. He was preparing for the final showdown. He knew that McGregor's empire had cracks, and it was time to expose them to the world. Darren hired a private investigator who had previously worked with McGregor's rivals. They spent days gathering information, tracking McGregor's hidden investments, and uncovering secret accounts. When the evidence was finally in his hands, Darren prepared for his most powerful move yet. He had one last play. Darren would leverage McGregor's own empire against him. He had discovered a massive tax fraud scheme McGregor had been running under the guise of charity donations. If Darren went public with this information, McGregor's entire empire would collapse. But McGregor wasn't going down without a fight. He had already moved to discredit Darren and turn the public against him. In a final confrontation, Darren went to McGregor's office, ready to face the man who had tried to ruin him. The room was cold, filled with a tension that was almost palpable. "You should have taken my offer," McGregor said, his voice low. "No, McGregor," Darren replied, standing tall. "You should have never underestimated me." With that, Darren released the evidence of McGregor's fraud to press, ensuring that it would be the end of McGregor's reign. Darren's life had been transformed from one of hardship and struggle into a powerful, multi-million-dollar empire. But the moment he realized how far he had come was when he stood at the edge of his brand new penthouse, overlooking the city skyline. The city that once seemed like an insurmountable challenge now lay beneath his feet, a testament to his resilience. The world had changed, and so had Darren. It wasn't just about money or fame. It was about something deeper. His journey was about proving that no matter where you started, with enough determination and the right strategy, you could build something extraordinary. The young man who had once begged for an opportunity now held the power to shape industries. As the city lights twinkled below, Darren thought about how far he had come. He remembered the days when he was struggling to pay his bills, living paycheck to paycheck. He recalled the mockery of those who belittled his dreams, the backstabbing from friends, the enemies who sought to destroy him. But now, standing tall in his newly furnished penthouse, he was finally in control. It was a dramatic transformation. A man once seen as insignificant had become a force to be reckoned with. Darren had come full circle. The very boardroom where he had once been humiliated by McGregor and his cronies was now his command. The new deal had gone through, and Darren was the new owner of the company that McGregor had once used as a pawn. The first meeting in the boardroom after Darren's acquisition of McGregor's empire was nothing short of dramatic. The room, once filled with skeptical executives, now buzzed with anticipation. Darren stood at the head of the table, commanding the attention of everyone in the room. The same men and women who had laughed at his initial ideas now waited for his every word. "Gentlemen," Darren began, his voice steady and commanding, "this company is no longer the playground of the corrupt and deceitful. We are here to rebuild, to grow, to create, and to lead. The old ways are over. The new era starts today." The executives shifted nervously, realizing the shift in power. Darren wasn't just another investor. He had become the architect of the company's future. His vision was clear. He would build a company rooted in transparency, integrity, and innovation. This was a new beginning not only for Darren, but for the entire company. His decision to take over was strategic, calculated, and designed to showcase his growth, his newfound wealth, and his ability to lead. He wasn't just a business owner. He was a visionary. In the months following Darren's acquisition of McGregor's empire, his legal battles were far from over. McGregor and his allies had tried every trick in the book to challenge Darren's legitimacy and disrupt his success. But Darren had anticipated this, and he had a plan. With the help of his legal team, led by the unrelenting Evelyn Shaw, Darren fought back. The corrupt investors who had once backed McGregor now found themselves out of business, unable to withstand the legal onslaught that Darren had orchestrated. Lawsuits were filed against those who had aided McGregor's fraud, and one by one, they fell. But Darren didn't just want victory in the courtroom. He wanted a public declaration that would cement his place in history. He wanted everyone to see that a man who had been torn down, mocked, and betrayed could rise up and take what was rightfully his. When the final judgment came through, McGregor's empire officially and legally belonged to Darren. The press erupted. The headlines screamed about the rise of the underdog, the man who had beaten the system. But Darren knew the real victory wasn't in the headlines. It was in the opportunities he had created, the people he had helped along the way, and the industry he was now shaping. Darren didn't stop at business success. He understood that wealth and power were just the tools needed to create lasting change. He began using his newfound influence to support the causes that had once been close to his heart: the issues of racial inequality, financial literacy, and empowerment for the marginalized. He started scholarship funds, built mentoring programs for underrepresented entrepreneurs, and provided resources for communities that had been overlooked by the corporate world. His success was no longer just about himself. It was about lifting others. Just as he had been lifted, Darren's company became a beacon of hope for those who had been told they would never make it. He used his platform to speak out against injustice and to challenge the status quo. But with this newfound power came responsibility. As Darren grew more influential, the weight of his decisions grew heavier. He had to navigate the complex web of politics, power, and corporate interests. He was no longer just a businessman. He was a leader, and with leadership came the need to make tough decisions, often at the expense of personal relationships. His story became one of resilience and tenacity, a journey that proved no dream was too big and no obstacle too great. Darren had faced it all: poverty, betrayal, failure, and systemic injustice. But he had risen above it all, creating not just wealth, but a legacy that would live on for generations. As Darren sat in his office, looking out at the skyline once again, he reflected on his journey. He had gone from being laughed at to becoming one of the most influential figures in his industry. It hadn't been easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is, but it had been worth every sacrifice, every failure, and every moment of doubt. The real lesson Darren realized was that the path to success wasn't a straight line. It wasn't a smooth ride. It was filled with twists, turns, and setbacks. But what truly mattered was resilience, the ability to keep going when everything seemed impossible. Darren had made smart financial moves, sure, but the true key to his success had been his refusal to give up. When the world had turned its back on him, he had kept moving forward. And now, he was living proof that even the most unlikely person could rise to the top. As the final scene unfolded, Darren stood in front of the cameras, addressing his followers, investors, and the media. His message was simple yet powerful. I didn't get here because of luck or shortcuts. I got here because I never stopped believing in myself. And neither should you. Whatever you're facing, whether it's financial struggles, personal setbacks, or the weight of the world on your shoulders, remember that resilience is the key. Keep pushing, stay focused, and never, ever give up. Your moment will come. But just as Darren was about to turn to leave the stage, a message flashed on his phone, an encrypted email from an anonymous source. It read, "You've only seen the tip of the iceberg. There's something bigger, something far more dangerous on the horizon." Darren paused, the smile on his face faltering. Was this the beginning of something even more significant? Or was it another threat he'd have to overcome? The screen fades to black, leaving viewers on the edge of their seats. As the episode ends, Darren's words echo in the minds of the audience. His journey is one of resilience, determination, and strategic thinking. He has faced down every obstacle in his way, and in doing so, has proven that the impossible is within reach for anyone willing to fight for it. The story doesn't end here. The twist suggests that the road to success is never without challenges, but that doesn't mean it's the end for Darren, or for anyone daring enough to take their destiny into their own hands. Viewers are left to reflect on their own journeys. What financial moves can they make to secure their future? What steps can they take to overcome the challenges in their lives? As the story continues, Darren's journey will inspire, challenge, and encourage the audience to dream bigger and push forward. If you learned something from Darren's story, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with others. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know what part of Darren's journey resonated with you the most. Remember to hit that subscribe button, because this story isn't over yet, and you won't want to miss what's coming next.